along in our material then. Okay, we're going to look at these two here, creating UI for many-to-many, different from our checkboxes we've done. We're going to use list boxes this time. And then we're going to learn how to filter across many-to-many relationships. So that's basically the main lessons for today then. So I've broken it down into two steps here, right? First of all, getting the many-to-many work using list boxes up in place, and then we'll look at the filtering, right? So just to talk about when we would use this list box approach in comparison to the checkbox approach we've already learned to do. Basically, as I say here, if you've got more than 15 to 20, I might even say anything over about a dozen. That number of checkboxes on the screen, if you get beyond that, it gets a little bit, should I say, irritating to the end user, right? There's just too darn many of them, okay? And in that case, it can often be easier to work with the two list boxes. We've seen this kind of interface before where you can pick items out of the one list, move them over into the other, and back and forth between the two until you're happy with the selections you've made, right? Really, really much more effective way to design the UI if you have a large number of options to choose from. Okay, so that's what we're basically going to do. So I've got the copy paste file ready here. I have Visual Studio open with how we left it off after our last bit of work on it together, right? So as I say here, now the first part of this, I'll confess to you, I know it's really repetition, okay? We're repeating, getting everything set up, even on the index and detail and delete views, just as we did, no different from our previous work with the many-to-many relationship. That was in the medical office example, that was the medical history, right? All the different conditions a person might have checked off that they've had in their medical history. Well, this first part of this is going to be almost identical. It's just a different scenario, but I didn't want to rehash or lose what we did in that example in the posted solution for the medical office, right? So I decided to add a second many-to-many, and we have to get it in place and working. Then we'll do a second part of this particular exercise where we focus on the actual edit and create process and how we actually use the list boxes in that case. So the first part I know is repetition, but yeah, follow along with me. Yeah, repetition often is a good way to learn. So it's not like it's a waste of time, right? So we're going to start off by adding these different entities and so on as we go. Okay, so things are good. We're working here. Everything's running, right? So I'm just going to come to models first of all, and we're going to add some models for this new relationship, right? So what I thought of was doctors. Okay, they go off for a little training course, sometimes 2 weeks in Boca Raton or whatever, or it might be a 2 year specialist program that they take somewhere, but they get accredited that they're a specialist in such and such an area, right? Sometimes it's a very big formal thing, sometimes it's not quite so big, and away they go. So here we have just a simple specialty, just an ID and a name, right? Now, in a many-to-many, as we know, there's two parents with a common child that relates them together. So the child, I couldn't think of a better name, so I'm just going to call it Doctor Specialty. It helps us relate the doctor to the specialty and back and forth, right? So I'll create the Doctor Specialty next. And it, again, is just our very simple associative, no load intersection table, right? Nothing in it but the two foreign keys, okay? The foreign key objects are there to hold the materialized objects, and the integers actually using this naming convention, of course, the system recognizes that they're the actual foreign key values we're storing in the database itself. Now, doctor, of course, needs to have uh, basically the same collection that we put here, right, in specialty, Doctor Specialties. Now I could add a display name here if I wanted to. I probably in the user interface will never be working from the specialty, but if I ever did, I guess I could. But definitely over here in the doctor, I want to give this collection a good display name as well, right? So that's why I've added it in my copy paste file here, and I didn't bother putting the same display name on inside the actual specialty entity, right? So it is the same line of code. Okay, it's that I collection of Doctor Specialty objects called Doctor Specialties, okay, initialized to an empty hash set. But here I'm going to give it a display name. That's the only difference between the two different classes. And it wouldn't hurt if I put the display name. I guess, why don't I do it? Now I've brought it up and talked about it so much, I'm going to do it here as well. Okay, probably never see it, but you never know. Okay, so that's good. That gives you my three new entities. In fact, I'm going to clean the screen up here, get everything off it. But we know that, of course, it's not enough to add the entities. It's our DB context. That's our conduit to deal with the database. So it has to be aware of these model changes, right? So coming into our medical office context, clearly the first thing to do is add the two new DB sets, right, for those new classes. So coming down here, we have all our other DB sets. There we have specialty, okay, a collection of specialty objects. We'll pluralize as specialties. I can't take credit for that. The IntelliSense actually suggested this pluralization, and that's good. Okay, remember, please follow this part of the naming conventions that objects should have a singular name, collections of them a plural name, right? And then we have our Doctor Specialties as well. Now, in terms of the Fluent API that happens inside on model creating, well, clearly with yet another, I should say, intersection, just like the patient condition was, okay, a simple no load associative entity, we're going to do exactly the same thing here, right? Many-to-many specialty. The primary key is the composite, okay, has key composite of the two foreign keys, doctor ID and specialty ID. And that's how we identify a unique doctor specialty, by both, right? And then you always have to think about cascade delete. So once more, we would want it on one side of this many-to-many, but not the other. It makes sense, right? That if you were going to delete a doctor, I mean, there are lots of reasons why you wouldn't, but if you ever were going to delete a doctor, it would make no sense to leave, behind these breadcrumbs, leaving them behind in the system about the different specialties the doctor had if the doctor themselves has been removed from the system, right? So the default with a required foreign key, we know the default is cascade delete. So we don't have to say anything. That is what we want, and that's what we get. However, on the other side of this family, right, specialty to the doctor specialty, no, we would want to restrict, right? We would not want to be allowed to delete a specialty if any doctors are credited by having that specialty in the system, right? So in that case, and we've done this many times before, specialty has many da 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 da. Everything up to here just describes what relationship we're talking about. So the real key is we're going to say delete behavior is restrict. So we're going to restrict deleting a specialty if any doctors have that specialty. Okay, that's good. So we have those necessary changes done in the context. This is very similar to what we did with medical conditions. That's why I'm kind of hurrying through it a little bit here. Now, in our initializer, wouldn't it be nice if we had some seed data to go along with this as well? And I think we can easily do that. So the little trick here is make sure, of course, we probably want to make sure we've already created all the doctors that we want to create. Remember, we made some initially, and then we came down here, we looped through to make a whole bunch more. And then we generated all these collections of the primary keys so that our code could pick out and use accurate, correct, database generated primary key values that actually exist, right? Okay. And then we went on to add more patients and so on. But as long as we're done adding all the doctors, and as long as we've already got, this code here, so we have our collections of our doctor IDs, then we can go ahead and put the code in place to seed the specialties, right? Because as long as we make the specialties first and we already have the doctors, then we're good. We can go ahead and seed both the specialties first and then the associative entity, the doctor specialties, right? So for specialties, I just have a big long list that I Googled, okay? A bunch of doctor specialties, just copied it off the web and I threw it in here. I'm gonna do a string array of these specialties. We'll loop through, okay? Uh, if as long as it's empty at this point in time, we'll loop through all the specialties and create a specialty object for each one, just assigning the specialty name from the strings in that array. And that's it. And we save changes. Now, just like we did up here for doctor, we need a count of how many and a collection of the actual primary key values of all the doctors. Get the same thing yet again here for specialties. Then we can go on to the intersection, doctor specialties, and add a few to each one. Same kind of code we've done before. Okay, I've just have my I, J, K counters here. I loops through the primary keys of the doctors. J is just a counter to add some specialties to each one. And K lets us step through, right, our collection of specialties so that we can make sure we use each one. And when we get to the end of the list, we reset it back to the beginning and we just work through the list again, right? Okay, so just going through all the doctor IDs. So this, each I value, okay, that counter, will actually be a primary key ID value for each doctor as we go through. And we'll add anywhere from 1 to 10, more or less, or 1 to 9, I guess, specialties to each one, right? So we just loop through until we've got that, how many, okay, added. We step through the actual specialties with our special ID, our K counter here. If we get to the count, right, so we run out of them, then we reset it back to 0, so we can start at the index of 0 and pull the whole list out again, right? And that's it. So we get the doctor ID, the specialty ID, bada bing, bada boom, add it to the doctor specialties and save changes. And that should take care of seeding these extra things. Again, the only cautions is make sure this is after you've added all your doctors. Then we add the specialties, and then we can add the doctor specialties, that associative or intersection entity. Okay, now obviously we're going to need a migration here, utilizing migration. So let's go ahead and do that next. I'm going to need the package manager console, and pulling up my common commands will make my life easier, because this is going to be another add migration, right? Now, I might as well give it a reasonable name, like doctor specialty, something like that. Shoulda, coulda, woulda done a build, but I didn't. So fortunately, the system did it for me. And there we go. So no big surprises here, because remember, look, we already have a whole bunch of other migrations in place: initial, audit, concurrency. Now we've just added doctor specialty, right? So this is just describing the changes from the previous model up to this point. So basically creating our specialties table, right, with its 2 columns and the 1 primary key. We create the doctor specialties table, okay, making up basically the 2 foreign keys, which is a composite primary key here. And the 2 foreign key relationships, it notes that the one allows cascade delete from doctor, okay, to the doctor specialty, whereas the one from specialty to doctor specialty, we restrict the cascade delete. And that's it. Okay, so that's basically it. And then drop would just be the reverse of the process. So while we're here, we might as well do our update database. And that way it's all done, packaged up nice and neat and ready for us to move on. Unless I get a big error and it crashes and burns and I go, what? But no, looks like it's going to be okay. Now, again, the most common thing is if the database is there already, okay, sometimes these changes are difficult to implement with SQLite. So, the easy fix then is just delete the database if it's there and run your update database command again. Should work for you that time, right? If it doesn't, what do? We not only delete the database, we delete the whole migrations folder, start with a new initial migration, and that should work every time. Okay, but I think we're good. We're ready to move on. So I'm going to just do a quick, oh, well, I don't really need to do a build. It would have done that as part of the process. So now we're going to get ready to actually start showing the many-to-many. Now, this part, again, is a repeat of what we did with medical history, right? Just a slight couple of little changes I want to point out. When we did that, when we worked with the medical history before, right, what we did is we came down to view models and we added a check option view model. Right? It just had 3 properties: the ID for the ID of the particular option, the display text that we're going to show on the screen, and then a Boolean, a true false, whether or not this should be checked, right? That's one way to put it, or is this assigned? Okay, that's another way to put it. So we're just calling it assigned. Okay, so that's fine, that works, but you know what? The approach using 2 separate lists is going to be different. We don't need the Boolean, right? So I could use this and just ignore the Boolean, but I think it's clearer and better practice to just add a separate view model class here. So I'm doing it under the view models folder. I'm going to call this list option view model as opposed to check option view model, right? And what's in it? Basically, 2 out of 3, right? Just the 2 properties, leaving out the Boolean, okay? And so that gives me all I need. Now, remember, this can work for us because we're going to maintain 2 separate collections, the ones that are basically selected and the ones that are available selections. So out of the total list, okay, some will go in one and some will go in the other at different points in time. You might move them all back and forth between the 2 lists, okay, but there'll only ever be one of each in each list, right? Or one, there'll be no repetition between the 2 lists, right? So if you had 10 choices in total, you might have 5 in one list, then you'd have 5 in the other because the total in both lists has added up to the total number of options there are. Okay, so that's good. We have that view model object. It's just a slight change from this one, and you'll see that change reflected in how we go about implementing everything going further. All right, so I'm going to once more clean up the screen, close all those tabs. Now let's come down. We're going to first of all work in the doctor controller and the doctor index, right? So I'll get the controller and under views, find doctor and index. Okay, so starting in the controller, right? Right now, what do we have in the index action? Well, we did add paging, remember? So that's why we have all this code here for our page size, using our page size helper and so on, okay? And we get our page data, one page at a time and things like that. But where's the actual link query then? Well, it's hiding. It's hiding right here because, we just put it in the one spot. It was simple and that's all we needed was go to the context, get me the doctors with an as no tracking, right? But now we're going to be adding more and more to it. So I'm going to take it out of here, okay? And we're going to put it in a different spot altogether, okay? It is going to be up top, right? Okay, hang on. Oop, sorry there. That's better. Okay, so all we're really doing is we already had context doctors as no tracking. So I'm just adding these includes, right? We're including from the doctor all the doctor specialties, and then each specialty will also include the specialty object, right? We've done this before. It's a way to kind of walk from the one parent down into the common child doctor specialty and back up and say we even want to populate the specialty itself so we can access the name of the specialty and so on. That gives us all the data. So that's our doctors. So I'm just going to take it, and that's what I pass when I call paginated list, okay? And that's our collection of data that's going to come from the database there. Okay, now these includes, we want to add them as well in other spots, right? Because we're going to want to show all this related information on our details. And even when we bring up a record to delete, it's not necessary. We don't have to show it there, but it's a good practice, right? So coming down here to details, well, look, we already have one include, right? So I'll just add the include for the new relationship, this many-to-many relationship. Let me just talk for a quick second about the include we had there already, because I don't want it to throw you. Because remember, we added this one, including the patients, only because we were going to experiment a little bit here. We used this details view for the doctor to set it up a bit like a master detail page where you'd have the details of the doctor up top, and then down below we actually show the list of all the patients that are assigned to that doctor as their primary care physician, right? So that wouldn't normally be here except that we added it for that purpose, okay? But we're adding this so that we can show the related information about all the specialties that the doctor has. So we can leave everything else the same about this query. Let's come down now to our delete, okay, both the get and the post for delete. So right now, these are just simple queries, has no tracking, right? So I'm just going to add my includes here. Now I can leave the as no tracking. I could take it out too for that matter. I would not lose any sleep over it at this stage because we're not adding anything else to the query or modifying it in any way. Uh, and we're only returning not one but a single doctor, so having the as no tracking, yeah, it's okay. I could leave it. It really wouldn't bother me if it wasn't there either. However, when we come down, I'm going to grab this query because we basically want to use the same one when we get to the post, because remember, if something goes wrong and we have to redisplay the page, we want to provide the same data again, right? So down here where we actually have the query, it's right here. Right now, it's a very simple one, just using that find async. Very, very fast way to actually query, right? It just uses the primary key only, and a very quick way to retrieve a record, but you cannot use includes. Now, the danger here by copying and pasting, we do not want as no tracking, right? If I were to have that in place, I would not successfully be able to delete this record, right? That tracking information has to be included in order to actually successfully delete any of the records out of the database. So that's the big difference between the get and the post. It's kind of optional in the get. I don't really need it, but it really doesn't hurt. However, in the post for delete, when I get this doctor object, if I did as no tracking, calling for remove right here, that would fail, right? I would not be able to actually remove it without the tracking information. Okay, so those are the changes I have to make in there. Now, let's go to the actual views then, right? We talked about 3 views, the index, details, and delete. So here's my doctor index right here. Okay, now remember we had this, although we added the form around it so we could get nice paging, for the most part, this is just as it was scaffolded, just separate columns for first, middle, and last name. I didn't worry about that, showing up, using all that screen space to show them separately because that was the only thing to show. But now we're having additional information. Makes sense to follow that other practice that we've demonstrated before using that concatenated version, usually full name or formal name, whichever one works best for you. I'm going to use full name at this point, right? So basically the table row in the header section, I'm going to cut it down to just 2 columns. Well, 3, including the one for the buttons at the end, right? Showing the full name and Doctor Specialties. Now here is where, good thing we added that display name, right, for the Doctor Specialties. So that will be what will be at our column. Whew, glad we did that. Okay, now down in the body, right, we're going to actually change this to full name. We don't need these technically, right? We don't need the middle name. And for the last name, right, I could live without it, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to replace it. Okay. I'm going to replace it with a different set of content inside these table data tags. Now, this is again not new. This is to show all my specialties, but we're going to pull the same tricks that we did with our collapsible bootstrap collapse, right? I'll just quickly walk through the logic because it might have been a little while since you thought about it, right? First thing we do is we get a count of how many specialties this doctor has, right? If it's not greater than 0, then we come right down to here and we just don't show anything. There's nothing to show because there are no specialties for this doctor. But if it's greater than 0, right, then we come into the if. So the first line we hit is this one here where we go with the first or default, we go and we get the specialty name, right? And that gives us, because the item is the doctor, okay, the first specialty, name of the first specialty itself. Now, if there is only one, so this next if is false because there isn't more than one, then we come down to this else branch and all we do is we show the name of that first one, right? Notice it says condition. That's because I've been lazy and didn't change it from the code on the other page. It really should be specialty, shouldn't it? So feel free to change that in your own code. Just notice that, sorry. All right, specialty list. Okay, so here is where we're going to build up the list of actual specialties to show inside of our collapsible div, right? So then we go to our Doctor Specialties, we to list it, skip over the first one because we already have it here, right? And then we can come in here and then add each specialty name with a BR tag. So it'll be a big long vertical list with all these HTML BR tags between each one. And then we build the structure here. We make a link to click on, right? And then the div that which we can collapse and expand, right? And inside it, that's where we list this raw HTML to show the name of each specialty in a BR tag so they vertically are stacked one above each other, right? Now, of course, inside the link, that's where we show the name of the first one. We pulled it out. We already have the name of the first one. There's more than one. So that's what we display along with this little badge, right? Showing the count of how many there are. And that gives us the information the user actually needs, right? Now, should I change condition to specialty? Maybe I should. So let me just select all this, do a Control H, COND, find that, and replace it with SPEC. There we go, in the selection. I'm going to do it one at a time. Okay, that's all it was that first condition. So now it says first specialty. Okay, I should really update my copy paste file with that code because that was an oversight on my part. When you reuse good ideas, sometimes you fall behind on actually yeah, making sure that you have everything in place for them. Come on. I just messed up my copy paste here, so I want to get it done correctly. Okay, there we go. So I'll have to update my copy paste file. Sorry about that. But what I'm going to do as well is come over to the uh, details and the delete pages, right? So here we're going to do the same kind of thing, but instead, of course, of a table, we have one of these description lists, right? Where we have our terms and our descriptions and so on and so forth. So we have the first, middle, last name. So after that, I'm going to put my code right out of my copy paste file here. It's funny. Here I called it specialty count. Okay. Oh, but there's my first condition again. Darn. Okay. So yeah, I have to fix this code as well. But exactly the same code goes into the details. The only trick here, be careful. Remember we added this extra stuff here, okay? The patients and that little table showing all the patients, right? Okay, so it's first condition. That's the problem, okay? So I'm going to do my Control H again, change first condition to first specialty. I'm going to go through all open documents, but I'll do it one at a time to make sure I'm not doing anything I shouldn't. Okay. All right, I think we're good. So, yeah, so the delete, does everything look right? So we're after the last name. Yeah, looks good. Details, just double checking. Okay. All right. So that's good. Okay, so I'll have to fix that up. But that gets us basically up to the point where we can uh, start worrying about edit and create. But let's just do a trial run right now, see how it's looking. Because we're seeding data, okay, we actually should be able to view the index, details, delete, and now see all of this related information coming up into view when we look at a doctor or doctors, right? That's my drum roll. We go to doctors, and yay, we didn't crash. All right, good. So there we see. So you can see in this case, there was only one, okay, specialty for the Gregory House, whereas here we have four. So I can click the link and I can see all of them, shrink it back up again, right? There's two here, et cetera, right? So we have all that information here. If I go to details on anybody, I just see that one. Let's go to pick somebody with a few more, okay? Go to details, and again, right, we have our expandable div, collapsible div, and back to the doctor list. Now, if I go to delete, same thing, right? So I can see all the information, know everything about this doctor before I actually go ahead and delete. Now, if I do delete it, by the way, remember, cascade delete would make sure that I could actually delete this record and all the record of them having these specialties would be deleted as well. Now, I won't be able to delete Doogie Howser, right? Because Doogie also has patients, right? And as long as there's patients, I'm prevented from deleting Doogie Howser. Okay. In fact, I can see that here on the details page. Look at all these patients. There you go. So yeah, I might be able to delete, and for if they didn't have any patients, I could delete them. But that's not what we're talking about right now. We're talking about this many-to-many relationship. Oh, sorry, I don't want to confuse things, but I just want to go through that quickly. So that's good. So we've got everything in place now. In the next one, second part of this lesson, we're going to actually then deal with edit and create, right? And here is where we're going to use our two list boxes. So as I said, everything up to this point has been hardly any different from actually doing what we did with our checkboxes, but now we're going to actually see the difference coming through.